The town I grew up in wasn't the kind of place where anything extraordinary was supposed to happen. Nestled in the quiet folds of upstate New York, it was a patchwork of narrow streets, maple trees, and old houses with white paint peeling off. Their sighting, the people who lived there were the kind who left their doors unlocked at night, who waved when you passed them on the road, who gossiped about little things because there weren't any big things to talk about. But if you stayed long enough, if you listened closely in diners or at the back tables of the bar on Main Street, hear the one story everyone in town knew, but no one wanted to talk about for too long. The Weaver house. The house sat alone at the very end of Hollow Creek Road, past the last cluster of homes, where the street lights gave way to darkness and the forest pressed in from both sides. Its windows were black, its porch sagging, its shingles curling up like paper from decades of neglect. It wasn't just abandoned, it felt rejected, as though the earth itself wanted to push it away. The story went that in the winter of 1982, the Weaver family father, mother, two kids simply vanished. There was no snowstorm that night, no robbery, no sign of violence. They were seen in town earlier that day buying groceries, and then nothing. When someone eventually went to check on them, they found the front door unlocked. Inside, the kitchen table was set for dinner, 4 plates, steaming bowls of stew, a loaf of bread in the middle. Chairs pushed neatly under the table. In the living room, a single lamp still burned, casting a weak yellow glow over the couch. Upstairs, beds were made, clothes neatly hung in closets, no drawers pulled out, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the family had simply stood up mid-meal and walked into thin air. The police searched the woods, dredged the creek, interviewed every neighbor. Nothing. The house remained exactly as it had been found until eventually it was left to decay. No one bought it. No one even tried. Over the years, it gathered a reputation just for the disappearance, but for what came after. Strange noises at night, faint light in the upstairs window when the house should have been pitch black, whispers in the trees if you dared to walk past after dark. People swore the place was cursed, that something in those walls had taken the Weavers and was still there, waiting. By the summer of 2009, I was 17. And the quiet rhythm of small-town life felt suffocating. My best friend Caleb had just gotten his driver's license, and with it came a restless freedom we'd been craving for years. Most nights, we drove aimlessly, music up, windows down, chasing anything that felt like an escape. We'd already explored the rusting shell of the old mill by the river and snuck into the boarded-up high school gym, daring each other to stay in the dark longer than we could stand. The Weaver house was different, though. It wasn't just a place, it was a dare woven into the fabric of the town. It was Caleb who first brought it up seriously. We were sitting in his truck in the parking lot behind the gas station, the glow of the store's sign casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt. He turned to me with that reckless grin he always wore when an idea had taken root in his head. "Let's go to Hollow Creek," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't need him to clarify what that meant. The words hung there between us, heavy and electric. The plan was simple: drive out after midnight, when the road would be empty, and explore as much as we dared. Caleb promised we'd bring flashlights and keep our phones ready just in case, though we both knew service was spotty that far out. I laughed it off, pretending I wasn't already picturing the black shape of the house against the trees, the way it looked in the grainy photos people passed around at school. Deep down, I felt the same thrill. He did part curiosity, part fear, and a little voice inside whispering that we'd be crossing a line. The second we stepped through that door, the staircase groaned under our weight as we made our way to the second floor, each step feeling like it might splinter and give way. The air grew heavier the higher we climbed, carrying the faint scent of dust and something older, something stale that clung to the back of my throat. At the top, the narrow hallway stretched out before us, lined on both sides with closed doors, the faded wallpaper curled at the edges, patterned with tiny blue flowers that had long since lost their color. Our flashlights swept across each door. As we passed, the light bouncing off tarnished brass knobs, every door was shut tight as though the rooms beyond had been sealed deliberately, except for one dot at the very end of the hallway. The last door stood slightly ajar, just wide enough to show a sliver of darkness within. It wasn't much, barely more than an inch, but in that inch, the shadows seemed deeper than they should have been, like the light didn't want to go in. As we moved toward it, the temperature seemed to dip, a subtle but noticeable shift that made the hairs on my arms rise. That's when I heard its soft, slow, and deliberate .creak .a. Pause .creak . The sound was faint, but it was steady, rhythmic, coming from inside the partially open room. Caleb glanced at me, his expression shifting from curiosity to something more cautious. We didn't speak. The sound was enough. My flashlight beam slid through the gap in the door, catching glimpses of dusty floorboards and a strip of faded wallpaper. The creaking continued, unbroken, each drawn-out motion as measured as a heartbeat, as though whatever was inside had been moving long before we arrived and had no intention of stopping. We pushed the door open slowly, the hinges protesting with a long, drawn-out squeal. The first thing the light touched was the source of the sound, an old wooden rocking chair in the far corner of the room. It swayed gently back and forth, though the air inside felt still and heavy. The seat was empty, yet the movement was deliberate, too steady to be the result of some lingering breeze. Dust floated lazily in the beam of my flashlight, disturbed by nothing visible. Then my light slid further across the room and caught the tall mirror leaning against the wall opposite the chair. Its frame was ornate, carved with twisting patterns that seemed to writhe if you stared too long. The glass had a strange sheen to it, reflecting the room in muted, almost faded tones, except something was wrong in the reflection. The chair wasn't empty. There was a woman sitting in it. Her hair was long and black, spilling over her shoulders in tangled waves, obscuring most of her face. Her dress was pale blue, frayed at the edges as though it had been worn for decades without care. Her skin was so white it looked almost translucent, and her hands rested neatly in her lap, unmoving. For a moment, I thought she was a trick of the light, an optical illusion caused by the warped glass, but then she moved. Her head turned toward us slowly, unnaturally, until the curtain of hair slid back enough to reveal the hollowness where her eyes should have been too deep black. Pits that seemed to swallow the light. Her lips pulled into a smile, thin and strained, stretching farther than seemed possible, as though the expression was being forced onto her face by something that didn't understand what a smile was meant to be. We ran without thinking. The hallway, a blur of faded wallpaper and closed doors as our footsteps pounded against the warped floorboards. The sound of the slamming door behind us still echoed in my ears, mingling with the thud of my heartbeat. Caleb's flashlight beam jerked wildly across the walls, bouncing off brass knobs and casting distorted shadows that seemed to lunge toward us as we passed. My breath burned in my throat. Each inhale ragged and sharp, but I didn't dare slow down. The stairs loomed ahead, and we stumbled down them, gripping the railing for balance as the wood groaned under our weight. The moment we reached the front hall, we pushed through the doorway and into the open air. The night felt warmer than the icy stillness upstairs, yet it carried no comfort, only the reminder that something had been in that room with us, something that had reached beyond the glass to touch me. We didn't speak on the drive back. The truck's headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness, the trees crowding in on either side like silent witnesses. I kept glancing at the side mirror, half expecting to see her pale face staring back at me from the back seat. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, and I couldn't tell if it was from the cold that still clung to me or from the image of those hollow eyes burned into my mind. In the days that followed, Caleb avoided me. His usual calls and late-night drives stopped altogether. 2 weeks later, his family packed up and moved out of state. I stayed behind, but I never set foot anywhere near Hollow Creek Road again. Still, there were nights when I'd catch my reflection in a darkened window or a bathroom mirror, and my chest would tighten, certain that if I looked too long, she would be there.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.